So Amy Fagan, host of the Grounded in Maine podcast, thank you so much for joining me on Podcast Junkies.
Oh my gosh. I'm thrilled to be here, Harry. Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here, really.
Do you remember how we crossed paths?
We crossed paths. Well, sure. Yes. I saw you first in a Jeremy Ends roundtable.
Oh, yeah. That's
And
right.
oh, actually, I saw you before that somehow around Podfest. I think it was around Podfest. And I was just starting my podcast and I saw that you had a vertical farming podcast. And I was like,
Yes. You might have
I should
attended
do
my
this. And
talk.
then I might have. And then
Yeah.
I contacted you and you said, oh, why don't you contact me once you've started? And I was like, yeah, right. He's totally going to just jump all over that. And so I never contacted you again. But then I saw you on Jeremy Ends and you were like so approachable. And I was like, one of these days I'm going to contact him. And then I started following you from there. And you just post some really great, super meaningful stuff. And I love what you're about.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. Thank you. Talk a little bit about your background. Like, how'd you end up at Podfest? It sounds like podcasting has been on your radar. Did you start as a listener and then you started getting podcast curious?
I was podcast curious for a long time.
Yeah.
So podcasting was not really in my realm of things that I ever thought was going to happen. I was telling you earlier, I never really felt like I had anything to offer, but I really wanted to learn. I actually was thinking about doing a YouTube channel with a friend of mine and talking. We wanted to learn how to be homesteaders. And
Okay.
so we thought it would be cool to do this YouTube channel and interview homesteaders and learn a new homesteading skill every week and then take it home and try these things and then go back the next week and say how it incorporated into our world. If it was easy and something that we could totally take on and continue, or if it was no freaking way, that is no. And then my friend just got busy and that didn't happen. And I was like, I'm not going to be on camera all the time. There's no way I'm doing a YouTube channel, just me. So I was like, I guess I'll do it. I'll do a podcast. And sustainability was general, sort of wide enough of a subject that I could come up with enough subjects, I guess, and not run out. And I think that in my idea of sustainability is more not this is sustainable and this is sustainable and this is sustainable, but more encouraging people and just learning from different people, what they think is sustainable. Because for me, it's about this. A lot of it is the story, what is sustainable to people and what drives them. What is that point where someone goes from normal life to I need to make a change. I need to do something different. I'm so curious about that point. But so I talked about it for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine messaged my sister-in-law that some friends of his were hosting a podcasting workshop, the Podcastaway Retreat with $10K day in Florida.
That sounds fun.
In 2022. And I was like, well, 2022 during COVID in Florida. And I was like, no way. Can't afford it. And COVID.
Yeah.
But he was like, I will use my flight points to get you there. Just pay for the workshop.
That's great.
And I was like, it's too big of a gift to reject. So I did that, and Focusrite sponsored us all to do a virtual course of the virtual track of Podfest that year as a gift for going to the retreat.
What do you think it was for you that was that pull to get you there? And when you think back and you think about all the pieces that had to align timing wise, resource wise, generosity wise from people that obviously cared about you and were supporting you, looking back now, does it seem everything was pulling you towards that moment to get started?
I honestly think so. I think personally, I will continue on a path that is comfortable, that's miserable, that is going nowhere unless something stops me in my path. Okay, let's stop doing this. Here's another option. How about this? Because I will rationalize anything because I'm not big on change. I'm not someone who really I'm so much better at it now. I mean, since podcasting, but like I was in a car accident 4 years ago. And
Okay.
so I had so many changes. I was out of work for 4 months and then I ended up losing my job from that. So like
Wow.
I changed jobs so many times. And then during that, I like started this jam business and which was also never in my realm. Not a business person, but here I am still with a business almost 4 years later. But I was just going to be like I'm just going to work my 9 to 5. I'm going to take care of my pets and do my own home thing. And then the car accident happened, which it was an awful period, but it was the best possible thing that could have happened, honestly, because
Yeah.
it stopped that routine that I was in.
Mm.
And I'm so happy now that not that happened, but that I
Yeah.
am
Like,
where I am now.
yeah, it's hard to look at things like that, experiences like that in the moment to think that there's possibly a reason that anyone could find for something that's especially traumatic like that. But I think it sounds like you've got the wherewithal to look back and see that sometimes things do happen for a reason, and sometimes it's a wake up call. And you mentioned this way that you had of being that you're not big on change, and you weren't into jam, but yet you started a jam business. If you look back, do you see like that pattern? Is that something that was early on for you that you were just not kind of following status quo in terms of the life you were living, or is that something that was different for you when you were younger, and that something shifted as you got older?
That's a really tricky question. I
Yeah.
don't remember a lot of my younger years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I blocked a lot of it out. My dad was married many times and we didn't
Mm,
have a great relationship. But so there was a lot of change, like moving around and people in
okay.
my life. So I don't remember a lot of things. I know I was as steady as I could be. Like just
Yeah.
I'm just gonna cruise through life and I just don't want anyone to be mad at me. I don't want anything to I just want everything to go really smoothly. And so I was at my jobs for like 13 years, 12 years, and I'm a lifer,
Yeah.
basically, unless something changes. And so, but just in general, like I'm like a loyal person to be around. I'm sticking around forever. I really don't like change. And
Yeah.
I think it's because a lot of things changed when I was younger.
That makes sense. Yeah. And so, do you think that you've developed now these abilities to move past that stasis? Because, like you said you're not big on change, and yet you started. Probably never envisioned that you'd start a podcast and you'd be in front of a mic recording, and kudos to getting all these episodes recorded, getting out of your comfort zone, attending a podcast conference, jumping on this conversation with me. I think. Do you find that you're building up that resiliency muscle in you, and just by virtue of putting yourself out there and maybe even surprising yourself at what's possible?
I almost want to say 100%, but if you say, would you do it all by yourself? I would say, no, ma'am.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it by myself, but I will talk to anybody any old time.
When you say you don't want to do it by yourself, do you mean just to have the support of someone either cheering you along or helping you like get through the challenging stuff that you may not be the subject matter expert in?
Oh, no, just like a podcast episode, just me and a mic,
Yeah.
not someone to look at, talk to, anything like that. I'll talk to anybody, but I just don't want to be like talking to myself.
Yeah.
I don't
I,
like that.
and when you got started with the show, you obviously had a lot of support from that conference and then from those training sessions. Was it helpful to figure out? I mean, I think a lot of the things that overwhelm beginning podcasters is all the moving parts, right? They look at it from afar or they hear a podcast. And how hard can it be? You just turn on your mic and you just start recording and voila, you have a podcast.
Just like that.
That's what it was like for you, I'm sure, right? That's all you
Totally.
did. So for the listener who is interested in starting a podcast or the viewer, how would you describe those early days about working through and trying to get a grasp of all the moving parts?
Oh, what I would say is don't listen to people. Honestly, I mean, I feel like some days I'm just kind of bucking the system. There are a lot of people that are saying, you want to have so many downloads, you want to have, the sponsors and you want to have the affiliates and blah, blah, blah. You want to make all the money. There's also, but you were talking earlier about building that muscle, the resiliency muscle and stuff, but you just want to be confident about what you're doing. You want to feel good about what you're doing. You want to feel fulfilled in that. Yeah, I definitely want to make money. I want to feel really fulfilled in that. And honestly, like I had this like life-changing moment a week or two ago when I was doing an interview and I was I'm speechless just thinking about it. And it was like the weirdest thing. And I was like, I can't even believe I'm podcasting. Like, I'm podcasting and I am meeting these amazing people.
Yeah.
Like, I never, Nebraska. Who would have thought? She's in
Yeah.
Nebraska. She thrifts for a living and she's creating these style bundles. Like, sure, that's great. But her story is unbelievable. And I'm like, I can't even believe I get to talk to you. I get to share your story. Who am I? And I keep having these moments of like the imposter syndrome. And it's on a regular basis. People are like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for this time. And I had this a couple weeks ago, a solar company, they were like doing these super flowery, embellished posts about me. This like super, trying to remember the powerful blah, blah, blah podcast. I'm like, dude, you don't really, you're going to make them listen and they're going to be like, that podcast?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I think I'm really like bucking the whole like AI thing and I'm not like against it all. I'm just like, I'm pacing myself. Like, I don't want to take it all on. I'm getting the whole like show notes and the rhythm in and putting my sound bites and doing my posts and all this stuff. Like, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. And then the social media marketing part, like,
it's a lot.
I don't have a team.
Yeah. Yeah. Most podcasters, indie podcasters do not. And I definitely feel for you because it's exactly what I went through when I started. It's like, well, it's a lot. I felt like the busker who's on the corner with the harmonica, with the drum, with the guitar, with the thing on his foot. He's singing. He's just like twirling a baton or something. It is like crazy, like all the things you're doing at the same time, just to get, hey, look at me, I got a podcast, especially now. So and I want to pause for a moment and just let you know that the imposter syndrome never goes away. And I've heard even Oprah say she has it as well. I have it all the time. And so I think it's something that we learn to live with as creators, because there'll always be an opportunity to see what someone is doing and measure ourselves against it. I think it's just human nature. You're like, and then this concept of like, wow, like who am I to be like talking to this person? But at the end of the day, we all put our pants on one leg at a time. And these are just human people. In my second podcast, Vertical Farming Podcast, I specifically speak to CEOs and founders of vertical farming companies. And in 2020, I knew zero about vertical farming. But I know how to talk to people and just have a conversation. And that's what's been, the connecting thread with this show, with that show, the fact that these are conversations. And I always want the listener to feel like they've just pulled up a stool, we're hanging out at the bar and just hearing Amy and Harry talk about podcasting, and they're listening in. It's like, oh, and so we're not forgetting about you, listener. We want you to be in on this journey as well. I say it ad nauseum. There's three people in this conversation, Amy, Harry, and the listener. So we're going on this together. And I think that's what you're building when you're creating this platform. Because if you think about these conversations that you've had, and I think on your show, you're up to 68 now, and you're having conversations with people you're giving them a voice. And that's a really powerful thing that you're doing. And I want to applaud you for doing that. I know that through this process, you've found your voice. You can't get 68 episodes in and not start to feel somewhat comfortable in terms of knowing what you're doing, feeling comfortable. Not to say you're going to be an expert at any point in time or you'll ever feel like an expert, but I think what you're doing by your very nature of just showing up, people get so overwhelmed. Like I don't like the sound of my voice, and they never get started, or they record a podcast intro that sits in their hard drive for 3 years. And your 10th is going to sound better than your first, and your 50th is going to sound better than your 10th, as I know you can attest to. So I just want to say kudos to you for continuing, especially during times when it probably felt challenging. And what you're doing is good work. And the platform that you're providing people is a space for maybe their first time to speak out loud what's in their hearts. And who knows what they're going to do. Maybe they'll start a podcast as well. So definitely just again, applaud you for what you're doing, because it's not easy to be a podcaster and do this on a continuous basis. So don't beat yourself up too much. It's definitely not easy, especially with all the things that we have to work through as podcasters. But it is great to see that you continuing to stay consistent with your show.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, and I don't want the imposter syndrome to go away, because it's nice to hear those flowery things, but at the same time, like, that feels weird. It feels weird. I mean, it's nice to hear, but then I'm like, wait, that's me. That's at me. Okay.
So when you think about that, was the intention to always start it as an interview-based show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I wanted to learn more about different ways to be sustainable.
Yeah. And were there shows that you were listening to that you were inspired by?
I love Jill Winger's podcast. Have you
Okay.
listened to Jill Winger?
No, I haven't.
It's called Old Fashioned on Purpose.
Okay.
It's a great podcast. I mean, she's a homesteader, but the way that she talks about it is so great because she'll say everyone is not, you don't have to be all in, which
Yeah.
it's different than what a lot of homesteaders will say, but you can be all in. You can
can dabble.
You can dabble 100%.
Yeah.
And I just think, and the things that she teaches are really, really great.
I think what's helpful for me to understand that, and we had a brief conversation, I think a week or two ago, we talked about how now for me, if people are watching this on YouTube, it probably looks like I'm in a sauna right now, but it's a lot of wood paneling back here. I am in the Midwest. I'm in just 30 minutes outside of Minneapolis now with my partner, Natalie, and she grew up here. So this is we're watching her parents' home and we're trying to debate whether it's something we want to stick with. And there's something to be said for waking up and seeing the trees, seeing the colors change on the leaves. And we have enough property here where we went out and built a compost bin. So it sounds like one of those things you maybe just want to have under the sink, but we went out and did that legit one, bought the wood, went to Home Depot. She found some plans online. So hinges, latches, like it's got the chicken wire. It was a full day project, and it's nice, this experience of working with your hands. And we have this thing now sitting in the back of the yard. So we've got this little tray of stuff that we have on the kitchen counter, and everything goes in there, right? The eggshells, the stems of the cores of the apples, like every little scrap of, that's compostable. And there's something comforting in just taking that out every day and just dumping it in there and just watching it over time as it turns into what it's going to turn to. And just little things like that. Our neighbors have chickens, so we got to watch them. They went away, so we had to watch them for a week, and I had to go over there to the chicken coop. I had to go.
Oh my gosh!
I had to let the chicken. I had to let the chickens out. I had to look in the coop for the eggs, and then at the end of the night, you've got to they're free roaming, so you'll see them in the neighbor's yard, and you'll see them next door. So we live on a cul-de-sac, so thankfully it's like a quiet street, but it's so funny. And they now, because my partner Natalie likes to feed them bird seed, they get acclimated to stuff like that really quickly. So you'll see them pick, we occasionally will open the front door and there's a chicken there with his head cocked. And it's like, where's my bird seed?
Yeah.
So all these things, and I'm sure you've had a lot of stories, people like this who, again, to your point, just to bring it full circle, we're not fully in, but we do have well water here. So we've got our own water source. So it's little things like that. I think as you start to try the things that are comfortable for you, there's something comforting about the resiliency and being able to support yourself and being sustainable. I think that's in the long term, hopefully is where we're returning to as a society.
Yeah. It's so nice, isn't it? Because you live in the city, right? Normally.
Well, now we live out here now. So we used to, I grew up in the city I'm a New Yorker at heart, as you can tell from my hat, but I grew up in the city. I've lived in 1-bedroom loft apartments in New York City, really where it's really cozy. And the biggest green space you have is probably Central Park. And so I've had that experience. I've lived in LA as well. Not a lot of yard spaces there. So this is kind of the first experience for me, just having this much space other than the little backyard I had in my parents' house growing up. But it is a interesting experience because once you've experienced it and you wake up and you hear the crickets at night, or you wake up and you see the trees is the first thing you see out of your window. There's something about resetting your nervous system that it just works wonders for stuff like that.
Right. Especially in the fall when the trees are changing color. I mean, I know in New York, they change color. Too,
yeah.
There are
Yeah.
less
Upstate.
trees.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. We have chickens as well. And our chickens will, oh my gosh, chase you down to the garage door because they know there are mealworms.
Yes.
Right on the other side of that door.
Yeah.
And they'll also meet you at the door of the house.
There's nothing funnier than seeing a chicken run.
Oh my gosh, it's the best. But people ask you, what's your happy place? And my happy place, literally, we have a lawn swing. We don't have we just have an acre of land. We have a lawn swing. And my happy place is sitting on the lawn swing with my dog, with cats on their leashes, and the chickens just poking around. I just love it. I never get to do that, but I just love it.
It's there.
The chickens. I mean, the chickens hang out in your yard as well. They just poke around.
They come over. Yeah.
Do they? I get to know their sounds. We have 3 roosters out of 10 chickens. They all have their own pros. The girls all have their own sounds. It's just really funny.
Yeah.
But just to get to know their personality is really fun. And they all look so funny. And yeah, when they run, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
especially when they're bigger.
Yeah. See a cat poking its head there. Yeah. Who's that?
Yeah.
Amelia. I love when we have guest appearances on the show too. And it's great because as podcasters, talking about podcasting, I love like to remind the listener and the viewer that we don't have perfect environments here. Like the lawn guy was here yesterday and the leaf blower is literally outside this back window that's behind me. And I'm just like, oh man, I just hope they don't hear that. And again, we've probably been through every single circumstance. I remember when I lived in the city, I inevitably would pick the recording day.
Sure.
That'd be the trash day. And it was like, the truck is just like beep, beep, beep. Or like the lawn, just anything you can think of would happen on the day you're recording. I'm sure you've got some interesting stories as well.
Well, I know my first podcast episode, our older rooster was just, it was like, I think it was June and it was a beautiful day and the window was open and he was outside and he was throwing it up. And I was like,
that's great.
My first episode, dude. And I was just like,
well, it is a homesteading podcast.
I know.
That's so really apropos. Yeah.
I was very tempted to do like a disclaimer and be like, I'm really sorry. But then I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
You're going to hear it again.
Yeah.
Because I have chickens.
Yeah. And so how's your homesteading journey changed or grown or evolved as a result of all these conversations you're having on the show?
Right now, I'm just taking it all in. I mean, really, I'm super busy.
Yeah, it's good.
I'm just keeping it really busy, but I'm trying really hard to get involved in stuff. We had my town in Maine had a climate action workshop last month, which was difficult. It was difficult. I mean, we're in an inflation period and my town is growing like crazy.
Yeah.
And it was really, really hard because, they're like, we should be driving electric vehicles. And we should all have solar panels and blah, blah, blah. People were like, we can't pay our bills.
Yeah.
We can't afford all these updates.
Yeah.
Which is very true. But it was just an interesting sort of tug of war. Like, we need to do these things. Well, we can't.
Have you always been actively involved in your community with these topics?
Yes and no. I mean, I try not to get politically involved because I have this tendency to be really irrational. Like, I get really heated and I don't have a lot of knowledge to back up. I just get really heated.
Yeah. And you know it, and you feel it in your gut or you feel it in your heart, and you're passionate about
back it up. I'm like, nope, I'm good. I got nothing else to say. I just had to say my piece. But I mean, I was part of a group that was helping to ban the single-use plastic bags in my town, which won. But then when COVID started, everything went out the window. I helped to put a dog park in my town.
Okay.
I am trying to get my town to support community solar, like the solar farms.
Yeah.
And use those.
How do you decide who to invite on the show? Are you scratching your own itch? Or you just want to learn more about a specific topic? Or as you've progressed with the episodes, I'm sure the show's getting some visibility, especially with a name like Grounded in Maine, to get more and more high profile guests on.
Yeah, I'm really open. I love the variety of different people. In the beginning, I started out with my friends. Of course, I've got a lot of friends who are herbalists. And so I had an herbalist on. My PT is a forager. So I had him on to talk about foraging. And I have a friend who has a tiny home and she's actually a homesteader. So I was like, tell me about some stuff. And she told me this really cool trick about putting a packet of yeast in your toilet instead of like, what do you use? People put like bleach or whatever in their toilet to unclog or whatever. But she was like, put yeast down instead. I'm like, really? That works?
What does the yeast do?
It just gets the bacteria going. It like feeds the bacteria.
That's so interesting.
Like, do its thing. It's more natural than chemicals, right?
I just learned a new tip today.
I know. I was like, you got to tell me that on the air. But so I started out with a lot of friends, and then as the podcast grew and I was growing my social media, I love Instagram because I can like reach out to people like Harry Duran and say, dude, I love that post. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
And then you see me and you're like,
yes.
Hey, let's talk.
Yeah.
But I reached out to Maine Community Solar, who is the solar group that I just interviewed, but gosh, I just had someone reach out. And one of my goals for this year was to, one, monetize, but two, I wanted to have people reach out to me instead of me having to chase everyone down,
Yeah,
which is,
yeah.
and I've had that happen a few times, which is very cool. But so Efficiency Maine. So I don't know if you guys have that in other states, but Efficiency Maine helps people to like arrange rebates and stuff to encourage people to get updates. So
Okay.
like we worked with them when we got our solar panels. So
Okay.
you buy solar panels and you get like $5,000 off of your tax. You get a $5,000 tax rebate
Yeah.
when you pay your taxes or
Yeah.
stuff like that. But so they were like, we'd love to be on your podcast. We're doing a big pitch to get some attention and we'd love to, would you consider having us on your podcast? I'm like, heck yeah. And then the next response was, how do you feel about sponsorship? I'm like, shoot, man, what is this? Is this, am I being punked? But that was super cool. And so we're talking about that for next year.
That's awesome, Amy. That's great news.
Yeah. But so people are reaching out to me, but in general, like I think I'm one of those people that just thinks everyone is really cool. And I find the good in people. And I just think, like, I had a lady on who so cool and she's a breathwork person and she's an energy healer. And she wanted to talk about making her own broth. And I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because, broth is it's not that big of a deal. But if you think about it, you literally just put a bag of vegetable scraps in your freezer.
Yeah.
And when you want to make broth, you just down water. It literally costs nothing.
Yeah.
It costs nothing. Whereas if you go to the store and you buy broth, you have those cartons that are covered in wax and you can't compost them and you can't recycle them. And they cost like $5. So like,
how's your broth game now?
oh, but I've been making my own broth for years.
Nice.
But yeah, I just think it's awesome that, some people are like, I'd love to talk to you about that. I'm very proud of myself.
How have you grown as a interviewer over the years, over the episodes? Do you find you're improving now?
I mean, I think so. I think I'm growing. I think I'm definitely more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
I find myself needing to improve my vocabulary. But in the beginning of podcasting, I also was using the free Zoom. And I was like, I'm going to be so prepared. I'm going to write all my questions down. I'm going to have everything all ready. And so I was like, I had my person in front of me and I'm watching my Zoom clock so I don't run out because I don't have a video editor and I have my questions in front of me. So I'm looking at my questions, I'm looking at my thing and I'm like, okay, now I have to weed out my questions because I don't have enough time. So I'm like reading my questions and trying to weed everything out and looking at the clock and I'm like not paying attention at all.
Yeah.
And so somebody brought that to my attention. So now the questions are out the window. I'm like, I'm just winging it.
I did the exact same thing. I had actually John Lee Dumas was on Entrepreneur on Fire, and he's notorious for his 30-minute interviews. So you've got to get to it. And I think it was just midday and I was feeling a little flustered and I had them in my hand. I was like, there's no way I can get through these. And I'm just like, I scrapped them and I was like, let's just talk. And just it's a great skill to have, this ability to be conversational with people and to just understand that every single person has a story. If you're willing to invest time in just paying attention and being curious, and my girlfriend likes to say judgment and curiosity cannot exist in the same space, right? So it's like, make a decision. Which one do you want to choose? As a podcast host, I'm always trying to be as curious as possible. And it's helped me become a better listener as well. And I think even with Squadcast now, I pin the guest's face or video so that because I used to have them side by side and I just inevitably your ego kicks in. You're just you're looking at yourself and you're like, what do I look like on camera? And that, again, you're doing a disservice to your guest. So I'm glad to hear that you're feeling more comfortable. And I think as you get better and better, it's just, I find that sometimes when I'm in the real world, I'm talking to people, it probably sounds like a podcast conversation because I'm asking questions. I'm like, oh, so why'd you do that? And when did you want to do that? And they're like, is this
am I
on a podcast right now? So, and people like to talk, and people like to share their stories. And then, so I think, it's fun. And for the record, I think you're super cool as well. So let's get that on camera.
I gotcha here.
What about, talk to me about the jam business and as if you starting a podcast and figuring out how to do homesteading. It sounds like it's enough on top of already what you're doing in your day to day. So what was the impetus there?
Well, the jam business came first. When I was out of work 4 years ago, I had the time to It was not my plan, but I had time to sit around. So I'll back up a little bit. I don't make a lot of money at my job. My husband is an arborist. He does just fine.
Yeah.
And so I have this sort of inferiority complex where I feel like I need to pull more weight. And so I'm like, I can't make more money by working more. I just can't. So I'm going to grow a garden and I will harvest the vegetables and I will can these vegetables and it's going to be it's going to be almost like making money by saving money, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been doing that and I always make jam and I make relish. I make terrible pickles, so I make relish instead. And canned tomatoes and stuff like that. And my sister got married in 2014 and I made little jars of jam for wedding favors for everyone. And they were beside themselves. They were like, this is the best gift. Like, they just said, you have to do this. Like, you need to make this a business. And I was like, but then I was out of work and I had nothing else to do. And people are always like, oh, you're going to watch Netflix like crazy, blah, blah, blah. I was like, no, I was doing webinars and workshops and listening to podcasts and stuff like that. And I was on fire. So I was all like, I'm going to start this business and I have no business doing it, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so I waited for an hour and a half with the state of Maine to get my license set up and get my EIN and all the LLC and all this stuff. So by the time I had to have foot surgery. And so by the time I was able to walk again, I had a kitchen set up and I was all ready because I had to rent a kitchen. So by the time I was ready to go back to work, ready to walk again, I was all set to go. And so May 2020, I started.
Perfect time to start a business.
Right, just as COVID was starting. I had the kitchen to myself because everything was closed.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so it's been really slow going and I'm not, I'm only one person. Yeah. So I can only do so much. But like in the summertime, there are farms nearby there's a farm that has like 16 acres of strawberries and they do you pick. So I pick all the strawberries. It's half price. So I save money.
Wow.
So I pick all the strawberries. I'm still working full time. So I'll go at 7 a.m. until 7:45. So just 45 minutes. I pick a flat of strawberries. I come home and I walk the dog and then I work all day and then I clean the strawberries and freeze the strawberries and then, do dinner and all that stuff. That's my summer. And then do podcast stuff at night.
Sounds like you've been pretty busy.
So, and then I started the podcast in 2022.
That's awesome. And so talk a little bit about how, do you get everything like now working synergistically together? Are you mentioning the jam on the podcast? Is the jam a sponsor of the show?
Jam isn't necessarily a sponsor of the show. I mean, I feel weird about doing that. I know people keep saying that I should do that. And I don't know. I mention it from time to time. I haven't quite figured out how to feel good about doing that.
Yeah.
But I make jam on Sundays usually. And then I do podcasting on week evenings.
And are you we made a batch of strawberry rhubarb jam. I helped a little bit, but my partner did most of the work, but because that's a great combo. But are you making a bunch of different flavors or just a bunch of different varieties?
Yep. I made strawberry rhubarb today and I made cranberry jalapeno jelly today.
Ooh.
Because I just happened to have the day off today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a lot of different flavors that I've been working on. It costs a lot of money to have it tested to be able to sell across states.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I've got an awesome apple preserves that have lemon slices and nutmeg. So it tastes kind of like apple pie. It's chunky.
Yeah. And do you ship nationwide?
I do.
Wow. I'm going to have to get my Amy's Jam order in.
I actually just shipped some to Minnesota. Actually,
you did? Okay.
I just shipped it out on Monday, and not to your house, not yet anyway. And I shipped out last week to another podcaster in
that's great.
In Tennessee.
Nice. And so you got to do more padding, I guess, when you're shipping glass jars, or that gets to be pretty tricky. I imagine
it's a wicked bummer.
Yeah, it's a lot of experimentation with that, but it's also all the things. I think I just want to continue to give you credit for taking imperfect action when it came to the podcast, when it came to meeting and recording and interviewing guests and then starting your business. And I think, like I said, I think you realize when you look back that you're really capable of so much greatness if you just get that momentum started. And hopefully when you get to those challenging moments, you can think about what would Amy 1.0 do versus what is Amy 2.0 going to do. And I was just give you that push and that encouragement to just don't doubt yourself, because you've clearly demonstrated that you have the ability to move forward and do things and take imperfect action. And I think, whenever that creeps up or whenever you feel like that you're not enough or you don't have the voice to do what you wanted to do, and you think, is this an Amy 1.0 thought or is this an Amy 2.0 thought? So just
Right.
to keep moving forward, and I'm definitely going to keep checking in on your progress.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was talking to some podcaster friends in the last year and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like in this midlife crisis. And they were like, you just gotta change the wording, like just shift it a little bit. And so now we're calling it my season of discovery. And so I'm making up for lost time for all those years when I was like, nope, I can't do that. That's not my
Yes.
thing. I'm like trying all these things. And so it's like my season of yes and like trying all the things.
I love that, the season of discovery. I recently completed my 53rd trip around the sun, and I put a Facebook post out and I called it a level. So I've achieved level 53 now, which is a great, accomplishment. And I think it's just helpful to think about it in that way. And it's like, I can learn from people who are older than, who are different levels than me. So at level 70 versus level 15, and we're just learning different things. And we're in a world that's changing so drastically and dynamically, it seems day by day. And so I think just looking for inspiration from others and in terms of how they did it and how not to do it. And I think is just a great way to look at it. And also remembering that everything that I love the fact that you obviously have the podcast, that you're coming on here, you're sharing your story. I think we're here on this earth to share our journeys with people. And that's how we raise the consciousness of the planet. And the beauty is that we have to have the conviction and the confidence to share the good and the bad, like the highs and the lows, because people need to be reminded that we're on an imperfect journey here. And I think we all see ourselves in each other and we're inspired by the things that happen. And there, whatever that saying is there, but for the grace of God, go I. Like I could have been in that situation, or I was in that situation, or I'm going through that situation right now. I can't believe she went through that, and or he went through that. And so I sound like a broken record here, but I just want to just keep reminding you, like you've got an amazing story that's still being written, but just continue to share it, because you just never know who's listening. You just never know who's listening, who's watching, and who needs to hear like the thing that you're saying right now in this exact moment for where they are in their life. So take that in. A couple of questions as we wrap up. What's something that you've changed your mind about recently?
Something I've changed my mind about. Chocolate.
For the and against
Chocolate for the good.
Chocolate for the good. That's a great answer. I like that. Were you not a fan earlier?
Growing up, I was not really a fan of chocolate.
Yeah. I think it's just so sweet. I mean, I remember I used to love the Hershey's bar with almonds, and I would eat an entire bar. And I remember even when I was in my 9-to-5 job, I would look forward to like having lunch and then going down to the store and buying a Hershey's bar with almonds and eating the entire thing. And then as you get older and you start to understand like dark chocolate, how much sugar's in there and the process that goes into those. Now my love is really like dark chocolate, 70%, 80% with like cherries or mint or something like that. And some of the stuff that comes in, the free trade stuff, and it's just amazing. It's like a delicacy and you go back, occasionally I'll have like a Dove or a Hershey's, and I'm like, whoa, that is just crap chocolate. So it's really, I'm just now a chocolate connoisseur.
It's true. Yeah, I know. It's a whole different situation. But yeah, the dark chocolate with like mint or coconut.
Oh yeah. Good stuff. That might be your next business. There's a lot more involved in making chocolate, I'm sure, than making jam. So what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about you?
That's a tricky one. I think it's probably trickier for me than it is for other people, because I'm so tempted to say that I'm smart. That is misunderstood because I don't feel like that. If you're ever having a bad day and someone's like, "Oh, you're so smart. Like what are you talking about?" I'm just like, you clearly don't know. But can I phone a friend?
Yeah. I'd love to. That's the first time that's ever happened. I wonder if you
I
do
don't.
you have a friend in mind? I would love to just see
I
you.
don't.
Okay.
No.
That'd be great for you. Just pick up the phone and be like,
I
"Hey,
know, that would be so
I'm on a
cool.
podcast conversation with Harry Duran, and he's asked." So,
What would you say is misunderstood about?
it's an interesting question because it sort of like allows you to step outside yourself for a moment and just kind of see, or sometimes think how I sometimes feel like because of the podcast and because of like what I write about, that people think like, wow, like Harry's just like got these like ideas and he's always just like willing to share what's in his heart. But it takes a lot to like write some of those posts. And then sometimes I go through phases where I get the impulse, or I get a download or something of a feeling that I want to share that just like really like hits home for me. And sometimes that's what you see sometimes in those posts. And then sometimes I go into the well and there's like nothing. I'm just like, I'm like, I don't know where that came from, but it's clearly not here accessible to me now when I need to write a new post today. So I think I've been giving myself grace and just also letting people know that like, it's not all wine and roses, and just sometimes, there's things that I struggle with personally, and there's things that I go to a therapist, and I have like mild ADHD, but I think that's the beauty of just reminding people like we all got stuff going on, and I think there's anyone even the people who paint these perfect pictures of themselves, later on you come to find like, oh, they're just actually like about to go bankrupt, and they're just like, living off, a ton of debt, and they don't have the perfect life, or their relationships are in shambles, and they're just kind of trying to portray these Instagram, these Facebook moments. And so I think we're going to see a resurgence, genuineness, in like realness, and like, hey, like warts and all, this is what life is about, because we all know that's what life is about. And I think it's the more people are comfortable in sharing that and when talking about it openly, I think we'll all be the better for it as well.
Yeah, I'm so here for that.
Yeah. And so what's got you excited as you think about 2024? We're in the fall season, harvest season. And as you think about that, as it relates to your show, do you have plans? There's some exciting sponsorship opportunities maybe happening for you, but do you think about like plans for your show, or do you take it sort of on a week to week basis?
It's been really a week to week basis. I've been thinking about maybe doing a little bit of a shift, but I haven't figured out how to shift it.
Yeah. What would the shift be?
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe more of a personal thing as opposed to sustainability, maybe a more personal sustainability than physical.
I think that with the name Grounded in Maine, it could be your journey of grounding yourself.
That sounds like it would be just me, Harry.
Well, the beauty is it's your show and you can take it in whatever direction you want. So, well, I know we've had some challenges with getting this rescheduled a couple of times, and I'm grateful that you've reached out. Sometimes as podcasters, we feel like we're speaking to the void, and we're wondering like, who's listening to the show? Are these just a bunch of bots that have just downloaded my episodes? Like,
right.
So quite honestly, like that's why I put myself out of my comfort zone to do posts on all the socials, because sometimes people have their own preference. Some people love LinkedIn versus Facebook or Instagram. So I'm just trying to be accessible in a way that allows people to connect with me if what I'm saying resonates. And so I definitely encourage you to continue to do the same, push yourself out of your comfort zone, because I think that's really where the magic happens. And so I appreciate the fact that we've gotten connected and I've gotten to learn more about you and then get to show the world your awesomeness as well.
Same. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate that. And I enjoy sharing the journey because I want to bring the authenticity, the humanity to the world.
Yeah.
I'm scared of the whole like AI and everything computerized.
Yeah.
I love computers. I think AI is great. I'm afraid to lose that whole humanity. And so I'm working it. I'm going to be here.
I think there's a balance there, because what I've found is that there's things and tools that I'm using that really make my life easier. So it's kind of like the Rosie the robot from the Jetsons. I know I'm dating myself there, but like the things that you really like, a robot just does faster, but it doesn't take away from your creativity or from your show's creativity. So I know some tools that we're using for automation of the snippets of the video, or even just writing the show notes. It's like, oh, wow, that's actually really articulate. And it puts my guest in the spotlight, because it's like, okay, now I can focus my time on getting better guests or having better conversations and stuff like that. So there is a fine balance. I think helping us do the things that are not our genius, I think is where the robots help. Right. And so we got to find that balance. But so if people I can't imagine they wouldn't want to learn more about you and just figure out ways to hang out and live in Amy's world and buy Amy's jam. So where can they go and do that?
I am on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all as well. LinkedIn, I'm on as Amy Fagan. but everything else I'm on is grounded in Maine.
Okay. And we'll have links to that. The podcast is groundedinmaine.com. Always nice when you can have the domain of your show.
I know.
Yeah.
Fancy.
Well, thanks again, Amy. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your inspiring story. I know listeners are going to get a kick out of it.
Harry, I'm so glad that you have this podcast. I'm thrilled to hang out with you.
We'll be connecting soon, I'm sure.
Sounds great.